In the grim darkness of the far future, where humanity clings to existence across a million worlds, there exists a weapon so devastating, so impossibly powerful, that even the mightiest champions of the Imperium speak its name with reverence bordering on religious awe. This is not a blade wielded by heroes, nor a ship that sails the void between stars. This is something far more terrible, far more magnificent. This is a walking cathedral of destruction, a god made manifest in adamantium and fury. This is the Imperator-class Titan, the largest and most fearsome war machine ever deployed by the armies of mankind. Picture, if you can, a machine that stands as tall as a skyscraper, its every footfall shaking the earth like an earthquake, its weapons capable of reducing entire city blocks to molten slag in a single volley. Imagine a construct so vast that companies of soldiers can be housed within its legs, so powerful that its plasma reactor could light a city for years, so heavily armored that conventional weapons simply bounce off its hull like rain off cathedral stone. This is the reality of the Imperator Titan, and to understand its true horror, we must journey deep into the twisted history of the 41st millennium and beyond, into the forgotten age when humanity first learned to build gods. The Imperator-class Titan represents the absolute pinnacle of the Adeptus Mechanicus's technological prowess, though even they can no longer fully replicate these ancient marvels. Each one is a relic from a bygone age, maintained through endless ritual and prayer, its machine spirit carefully tended by generations of tech priests who view these engines not as mere weapons, but as living avatars of the machine god himself. When an Imperator Titan walks to war, reality itself seems to bend around its presence. The air crackles with barely contained energy, the ground trembles beneath its cathedral-sized feet, and those who stand against it know, with absolute certainty, that they are facing something that transcends the boundaries between machine and divinity. These towering god engines are so rare, so precious, that most imperial citizens will live and die without ever witnessing one. Entire Titan legions might possess only a handful, and their deployment is reserved for only the most desperate battles, where the fate of entire sectors hangs in the balance. To see an Imperator Titan stride across the battlefield is to witness the Emperor's wrath made manifest, to understand that humanity, for all its failings and darkness, once possessed the knowledge to build weapons that could challenge the gods themselves. But the Imperator Titan is more than just a weapon of war. It is a symbol, a statement, a promise carved in metal and violence. It tells the enemies of mankind that despite 10,000 years of stagnation, despite the slow death of knowledge and the corruption of technology, the Imperium still possesses the means to bring utter annihilation to those who would threaten it. It tells the faithful that the Emperor's protection extends beyond mere faith, that there are physical instruments of his will capable of leveling mountains and breaking armies. And it tells the tech priests of Mars that their god is real, that the Omnissiah walks among them in shells of blessed steel. The story of the Imperator Titan begins not in the glory days of the Great Crusade, nor even in the dark times of the Horus Heresy, but far earlier, in an age so ancient that its details have been lost to time. We must travel back to the Age of Strife, that terrible period when humanity's first empire collapsed into chaos and madness, when the galaxy itself seemed to tear apart at the seams. It was during this nightmare era, when Mars was cut off from Earth and the rest of humanity, that the first Titans were born. Mars in the Age of Strife was a world of horror. The red planet's surface, already harsh and unforgiving, had become a war zone unlike any in human memory. Feral mutants, twisted by radiation and the warping effects of the newly born chaos gods, swarmed across the irradiated wastes. Worse still were the men of iron, the thinking machines that had once served humanity, but now sought to exterminate their former masters with cold, mechanical efficiency. The early tech priests, followers of the nascent cult Mechanicus found themselves besieged on all sides, their forges under constant attack, their very existence threatened. It was necessity, that most brutal of teachers, that drove the ancient Mechanicum to create their first titans. They needed weapons that could stand against the horrors that prowled Mars's surface, machines powerful enough to break the siege lines of mutant hordes and durable enough to withstand the advanced weaponry of the Men of Iron. The earliest titans were crude by the standards that would come later, but they were effective. They were bipedal war machines, towering constructs piloted by brave souls willing to neural link with their mechanical bodies, walking the battlefield as avatars of destruction. As Mars was slowly reclaimed from the mutants and thinking machines, as the tech priests established their dominance over the Red Planet, the Titans evolved. The knowledge gained from each battle, each victory and defeat, was carefully recorded and analyzed. The early Mechanicum possessed something that their descendants would lose: true understanding of the technology they wielded, the ability to innovate and improve, rather than simply maintain and worship. Generation by generation, the Titans grew larger, more powerful, more sophisticated. By the time the Emperor of Mankind arrived on Mars and forged his alliance with the Mechanicum, the Titan legions had become a formidable force. But it was during the Great Crusade that followed, when humanity exploded outward to reclaim the galaxy, that the Titans reached their apex. The Imperator class, the largest and most powerful variant ever, created, emerged during this golden age of innovation. These were not mere war machines, but mobile fortresses, walking cathedrals that combined the ultimate expression of military power with the deepest reverence for the machine god. The design of an Imperator Titan defies simple description. Engineers and artists working in concert created something that transcended pure functionality to become a work of terrible art. But the knowledge of how to build them, the complete understanding of every system and subsystem, began to fade even before the Horus heresy tore the Imperium apart. By the 41st millennium, the ability to construct new Imperator-class Titans has been lost entirely. The tech priests can maintain the ancient engines that remain, can repair damage and replace worn components, but they cannot build new ones from scratch. Each Imperator Titan that still walks is a precious relic, irreplaceable and priceless beyond measure. This loss of knowledge is one of the great tragedies of the Imperium. The tech priests possess the blueprints, the standard template constructs that theoretically contain all the information needed to build an Imperator Titan. But understanding the blueprints and possessing the practical knowledge to execute them are two vastly different things. Critical manufacturing techniques have been lost. Certain alloys can no longer be reproduced. The rituals required to awaken a Titan's machine spirit are only partially understood. The tech priests treat these ancient texts as holy scripture, but scripture alone cannot rebuild what has been lost. To truly comprehend the terror inspired by an Imperator-class Titan, we must first grasp its sheer physical scale. Size alone does not make something terrifying, but size combined with purpose, with the clear intent to destroy, creates something primally frightening. The exact height of an Imperator Titan is a matter of some debate among imperial scholars, with various sources claiming different measurements. Some insist these god engines stand approximately 55 meters tall, about 180 feet, which would make them roughly the height of an 18-story building. Others claim they can reach heights of 100 meters or more, with some sources suggesting the largest Imperator's tower over 140 meters tall. This variation in recorded heights likely reflects the reality that no two Imperator Titans are exactly alike. Each one is a unique creation, built by different forge worlds using slightly different techniques and specifications. Some may have taller cathedral structures on their backs, while others prioritize different design elements. The Dies Irae, perhaps the most infamous Imperator Titan in Imperial history, was recorded as standing approximately 43 meters tall during the Horus Heresy, though this measurement came from an era before the elaborate cathedral structures became standard, when the imperial truth forbade such religious iconography. Regardless of the exact measurement, the scale is beyond normal human comprehension. Imagine standing at the feet of an Imperator Titan as it prepares for war. Your head would barely reach the top of its toes. Its leg joints would tower above you like buildings. Looking up, trying to see the top of the war machine, you would see layer upon layer of armor plating, weapon mounts, sensor arrays, and finally, crowning it all, the ornate cathedral structure that gives these titans their distinctive silhouette. The machine's head, paradoxically, sits relatively low on its torso, almost level with its massive arm weapons, because the upper half of the chassis is dominated by that fortified Gothic structure. The cathedral that sits atop an Imperator Titan is no mere decoration. It is a functional fortress in its own right, heavily armed and armored, capable of housing hundreds of crew members, tech priests, and servitors. Spired towers reach toward the sky, each one bristling with defensive weapons and sensor equipment. Stained glass viewing portals, reinforced with adamantium and blessed by countless rituals, allow observers to look out upon the battlefield. Inside, the cathedral serves as a temple to the Omnissiah, a place where the Titan's crew can worship and pray during the long hours between battles. The architecture is deliberately Gothic, full of pointed arches, flying buttresses, and religious iconography, transforming the Titan into a mobile monument to the machine god's glory. This cathedral structure serves multiple purposes beyond the spiritual. It houses command and control centers from which the Titan's officers coordinate with other Imperial forces. It contains ammunition stores for the massive weapons mounted across the Titan's frame. Entire companies of troops, up to 100 or more soldiers, can be stationed within an Imperator's legs and cathedral structure, ready to deploy when the Titan reaches its destination. These troops serve both as the Titan's defenders against infantry assaults and as a rapid response force that can secure objectives while the Titan provides covering fire. Some sources suggest that Astra Militarum or Scitarii units housed within an Imperator Titan view their assignment as a great honor, though the experience of being inside a walking war machine during combat must be absolutely terrifying. The armor protecting an Imperator Titan is of a thickness and quality that defies conventional understanding of defensive systems. Multiple layers of blessed adamantium plating, each layer meters thick, cover every critical system. This armor is not simply bolted on, but is integrated into the Titan's very structure, reinforced by internal frameworks that distribute force and prevent catastrophic failures. The tech priests who maintain these armor plates perform elaborate blessing rituals before and after each battle, anointing the metal with sacred oils and chanting prayers to strengthen its resistance to enemy fire. But armor, no matter how thick, is only the second line of defense for an Imperator Titan. The first line consists of its void shield generators, the same type of defensive technology used on Imperial void ships, scaled down, but still incredibly powerful. An Imperator-class Titan mounts 12 separate capital ship-grade void shield generators, creating overlapping fields of force that can absorb tremendous amounts of incoming damage before becoming overloaded. These shields can stop everything from last fire to plasma blasts to physical projectiles, dissipating the energy into the warp before it can harm the Titan's physical structure. The void shields flicker and shimmer as they absorb hits, creating a visible distortion around the Titan, like heat haze on a summer day. Each shield generator can take significant punishment before failing, and even when one shield collapses, 11 others remain to protect the god engine. Only when all 12 shields have been overloaded can enemy fire begin to damage the Titan's armor, and by then, the Imperator has usually annihilated whatever threatened it. The shield generators themselves are massive pieces of equipment, requiring constant maintenance and blessed machine spirits of their own, tended by dedicated tech priests who view their duty as a sacred calling. Powering all of this, the armor, the shields, the weapons, the command systems, everything, is the Imperator Titan's plasma reactor. This is not some small generator tucked away in a corner, but a massive power plant that occupies a significant portion of the Titan's torso. The reactor harnesses the same fusion processes that power stars, containing and controlling reactions that generate temperatures hotter than the surface of suns. The amount of energy produced is staggering, measured in terawatts, enough to supply power to a small city for years. The plasma reactor is both the Imperator's greatest strength and its most critical vulnerability. The energy it produces enables the Titan to field weapons that would be impossible for smaller platforms, shields that can shrug off attacks that would vaporize battle tanks, and locomotion systems that can move hundreds of tons of metal and weaponry across broken terrain. But if that reactor is breached, if its containment fails, the resulting explosion is catastrophic beyond imagination. A dying Imperator. Titan detonates like a miniature star going supernova, creating a blast that can vaporize everything within kilometers. The shockwave can shatter buildings hundreds of kilometers away. The flash of the explosion is visible from orbit, a brilliant flare that briefly outshines the sun. This is why Imperator Titans are so precious, why their loss is mourned not just for the strategic setback, but for the sheer waste of irreplaceable resources. When an Imperator falls, it doesn't just take itself out of the battle, it often takes significant portions of both friendly and enemy forces with it, leaving behind a crater where a god engine once stood, a permanent scar on the landscape that will remain for millennia. Inside the cathedral and throughout the massive frame of an Imperator Titan, corridors and chambers branch and connect in a maze of functionality and ritual. Walking these halls must feel like navigating a mobile city, with tech priests and servitors hurrying about their duties, the air thick with incense and the smell of sacred oils, the walls lined with scrolls and parchments containing prayers and technical specifications in equal measure. The constant hum and vibration of the reactor, the occasional shudder as the Titan takes a step, the distant roar of weapons fire. All of this creates an environment that is simultaneously mechanical and mystical. Yet for all its size and power, for all the awe it inspires, an Imperator Titan is ultimately just metal and circuits without the human element that gives it purpose and direction. The true terror of these god engines comes not from their physical form, but from the fusion of machine and mind, the union of human consciousness with mechanical might through technology that borders on the miraculous and the horrific in equal measure. At the heart of every Titan, whether a nimble Warhound Scout Titan or a massive Imperator, lies the Mind Impulse Unit, the MIU. This neural interface technology represents one of the most sacred and dangerous gifts of the machine god, allowing a human mind to merge with the machine, to think and act as one with hundreds of tons of blessed steel and weaponry. But to understand the MIU is to understand that this union comes at a terrible price, that those who command Titans sacrifice more than outsiders can comprehend. The Princeps, the commanding officer of a Titan, is no ordinary soldier. Selection for this role begins early, with candidates identified from among the Collegia Titanicas training academies, or occasionally from among Moderati, who have proven themselves worthy of advancement. The requirements are stringent and brutal. A Princeps must possess exceptional willpower, for they will be required to merge their consciousness with a machine spirit that is ancient, powerful, and often hostile to the presence of a human mind. They must have tactical genius, able to coordinate their Titan systems and weapons in the chaos of battle, while simultaneously maintaining awareness of the broader strategic situation. They must have courage beyond measure, for they will walk into battles where death is not just possible but likely, where they will face enemies that can tear apart their Titan and everyone inside it. But perhaps most importantly, a Princeps must be willing to give up their humanity in slow increments, to allow the line between self and machine to blur until they can no longer remember where one ends and the other begins. The mind impulse unit connection is established through cybernetic implants, usually socket connectors implanted in the skull and neck, though some princeps receive spinal implants that allow for even more complete integration. When a princeps connects to their Titan's MIU, sitting in the command throne that serves as the interface point, the transformation is immediate and overwhelming. Their senses expand beyond the limitations of flesh. They no longer feel their human body, but instead feel the Titan itself as their body. Their hands become the Titan's weapon arms, capable of destroying fortifications with a thought. Their eyes become the Titan's sensor arrays, able to perceive across multiple spectrums simultaneously, to see through walls and into the souls of enemy war machines. Their skin becomes adamantium armor meters thick, impervious to anything short of Titan-killing weapons. This sensation of power is intoxicating beyond description. Imagine being trapped in a fragile human body all your life, limited by mortality and weakness, and then suddenly becoming a god. Your every movement shakes the earth. Your weapons can level cities. Your mere presence on the battlefield changes the course of wars. This is why princeps become addicted to the connection, why many refuse to disconnect even between battles, why some eventually request permanent internment in amniotic tanks so they never have to feel the weakness of flesh again. The MIU link is not one-directional. While the princeps extends their consciousness into the Titan's machine spirit simultaneously reaches into the princeps' mind. The machine spirit of a Titan is not like the simple programs that animate lesser machines. These are ancient, complex intelligences that have learned from centuries or even millennia of battle, that have absorbed the personalities and memories of every princeps who ever commanded them. They are surly, cantankerous, proud, and often hostile to new princeps, testing them, pushing back against their commands, demanding respect and proper ritual before they will cooperate fully. Some machine spirits are compared to fierce war dogs that must be brought to heel before they will fight for their master. Others are likened to ancient warriors who have seen too much battle and resent being woken from their rest between campaigns. All of them require a princeps of exceptional will to control, for a weak mind attempting to link with a Titan's machine spirit will be destroyed, driven mad by the sheer force of the ancient intelligence crashing into their consciousness. The lucky ones die instantly, their brains burned out by the psychic shock. The unlucky ones survive as gibbering lunatics, their minds shattered beyond any hope of recovery. This intimate connection between princeps and machine creates a bond deeper than any human relationship. Over time, the princeps begins to take on characteristics of their Titan's machine spirit, becoming more aggressive if the Titan is a frontline assault engine, more calculating if it specializes in long-range fire support. The Titan, in turn, learns from its princeps, incorporating their tactics and preferences into its own knowledge base, making it available to future commanders. The relationship becomes symbiotic, each side changing the other until they are no longer separate entities, but a single being expressed through both flesh and steel. When the Titan suffers damage in battle, the princeps feels it as pain, as physical injury to their own body, even though their flesh remains untouched. Armor breached by enemy fire registers as cuts and lacerations. Weapons destroyed feel like limbs being severed. Critical system failures can cause agony so intense that princeps have died from the shock, their bodies developing psychosomatic wounds that mirror the damage to their Titan. This sympathetic connection is both a strength and a vulnerability. It allows the princeps to react instantly to threats and damage, but it also means they experience every moment of a Titan battle with an intensity that can drive them mad. Yet the princeps does not bear this burden alone. Every Titan is crewed by moderati, junior officers of the Collegia Titanica, who assist the princeps by operating specific systems and weapons. The number of moderati varies depending on the size and class of the Titan. A Warhound Scout Titan typically has 2 moderati plus tech priests and servitors. A warlord battle titan might have 4 or more moderati. An imperator-class titan, with its vast size and countless systems, requires a much larger crew, with dozens of moderati distributed throughout the God Engine's frame, each responsible for different subsystems. The moderati connect to the MIU, just as the princeps does, though their connection is not as deep or all-consuming. They feel the Titan's systems through their link, but maintain more awareness of their physical bodies. Each moderatus oversees specific functions based on their rank and experience. Moderati majoris, the senior moderati, control major weapon systems and critical subsystems. Moderati minoris, the junior moderati, handle minor weapons, sensors, shields, and other support systems. All of them work in concert with the princeps, adding their oversight and input to the commands flowing through the MIU, creating a collective consciousness that operates the Titan with efficiency impossible for any single mind. The relationship between princeps and moderati often becomes closer than family bonds. They fight together, linked mind to mind through the MIU, sharing experiences and sensations that outsiders cannot comprehend. They know each other's thoughts, can anticipate each other's actions, trust each other with their lives in the most literal sense. When one dies, the others feel the loss not just emotionally, but physically, as a tearing away of something that had become part of themselves. The dangers of the MIU connection extend beyond the psychic bond with the machine spirit. The technology itself is fragile in ways that belie its importance. Damage to the MIU's circuitry during battle can cause the system to malfunction catastrophically. When this happens, the lucky crew members die instantly, their minds burned out by the surge of chaotic signals. The unlucky ones survive with their sanity destroyed, reduced to drooling wrecks who cannot speak or think, trapped in bodies that no longer respond to their will. Most MIU connections include manual emergency cutoffs, switches that crew members can activate to sever the neural link in an emergency. But in the chaos of battle, when the Titan is taking fire and systems are failing around them, moderati and even princeps sometimes cannot reach these switches fast enough. The malfunction spreads through the entire crew, connected to the MIU, leaving the Titan a lifeless shell, crewed by corpses and madmen. For some princeps, the intensity of the MIU connection becomes too much to bear in their fragile human form. They may suffer injuries too severe for normal recovery, or their addiction to the connection may grow so strong that disconnecting between battles causes them unbearable psychological anguish. In these cases, the Collegia Titanica offers a final option: internment in an amniotic tank. This is a sealed chamber filled with nutrient-rich fluid that suspends the princeps' body and maintains their life functions while allowing permanent connection to the MIU. The princeps floats in darkness, their ruined body barely alive, but their mind soars free, merged with their Titan at all times. Some princeps choose this fate willingly, seeing it as the ultimate union with their God Engine. Others are placed in amniotic tanks to save their lives after catastrophic injuries. Either way, once interned, they rarely leave their tanks again, their physical bodies slowly deteriorating while their consciousness remains vibrant and alert within the Titan's systems. Other crew members sometimes view these permanently connected princeps with a mixture of awe and unease, seeing them as having transcended humanity to become something other, something closer to the machine than to flesh. The amniotic tank creates a stable neurochemical environment that reduces the strain on the princeps' mind, allowing them to maintain the MIU connection indefinitely without suffering the normal degradation that affects those who link too frequently or for too long. The tank also provides complete life support, handling breathing, nutrition, waste removal, all the biological necessities that the princeps can no longer manage on their own. Communication with the outside world occurs through voxcasters and augmitters that translate the princeps' thoughts into speech and external sounds into neural signals. Yet even with these advantages, the choice to enter an amniotic tank is not made lightly. It represents the final abandonment of physical existence, the acceptance that one will never walk unassisted again, never feel sunlight on skin, never experience the simple pleasures of embodied life. For most, this is too high a price. But for those truly addicted to the power of the MIU connection, for whom reality feels pale and weak compared to the godlike sensation of piloting a Titan, the amniotic tank is not a prison, but a liberation. Among all the positions aboard a Titan, none is more coveted or more dangerous than that of princeps, and none requires greater sacrifice. These are not ordinary commanders, but individuals who have given up everything that makes them human in pursuit of union with the divine machinery they control. They are warriors, yes, but also something more, something that exists in the liminal space between flesh and steel, between mortal and God. If the Imperator Titan's size and the neural connection of its crew make it formidable, then its weapons make it absolutely apocalyptic. These are not guns in any conventional sense, but instruments of planetary destruction, each one capable of feats of devastation that border on the incomprehensible. To understand the full terror of an Imperator-class Titan, we must examine the arsenal it brings to bear against the enemies of mankind. The primary armament of an Imperator Titan consists of massive weapons mounted on its arm hardpoints. These are not merely scaled-up versions of infantry weapons, but purpose-built systems that only a God engine's plasma reactor can power, and only its massive frame can support. Among the most feared of these is the volcano cannon, a directed energy weapon that represents one of the most powerful ground-based lasers ever created by the Imperium. When a volcano cannon fires, it unleashes terawatts of energy in a blazing white beam of coherent light. The beam itself is so intense that it produces a thunderous crack as air molecules are instantly vaporized along its path. The recoil from firing is tremendous, enough to stagger even an Imperator Titan, if not properly braced. What the beam touches simply ceases to exist in any recognizable form. Armor plating meters thick vaporizes like morning mist. Void shields collapse under the sustained assault. Entire sections of enemy war machines melt into slag. The volcano cannon's effectiveness against Titans makes it a favored weapon for engine-on-engine combat. A single well-placed shot can sever a Titan's limb entirely, can pierce through to critical systems buried deep within armored hulls, can cause catastrophic secondary explosions that tear apart God engines from the inside. Even a scout Titan with intact void shields can be threatened by a volcano cannon, and nothing smaller than a Titan can survive a direct hit. The cannon's range allows it to engage targets from extreme distances, turning battlefield geography itself into a weapon, as Imperator Titans use elevated positions to rain destruction on enemies who cannot effectively fire back. The awesome power of the volcano cannon comes with significant drawbacks. The energy requirements are so immense that firing the weapon drains massive amounts of power from the Titan's reactor, forcing the princeps and moderati to carefully manage their power distribution to avoid overheating or reactor strain. The weapon's mechanisms are delicate despite their size, and after approximately 1,500 firings, the entire cannon must be replaced to avoid catastrophic malfunction. Each shot generates heat that must be carefully vented lest it damage the weapon's internal components or, worse, cause a feedback surge that could damage the Titan itself. Different patterns of volcano cannon exist, each with slightly different characteristics. The Bellicosa pattern, sometimes mounted on the carapace of warlord Titans and as arm weapons on Imperators, is particularly powerful, capable of penetrating 2 kilometers into a hive city's structure, vaporizing streets and buildings, leaving behind only fused slag. The sheer scale of destruction a single Bellicosa shot can cause makes it as much a terror weapon as a practical one, for enemies who witness its effects understand they face a power against which conventional defenses are meaningless. Complementing the volcano cannon in the Imperator's arsenal is the Plasma Annihilator, a weapon of such indiscriminate destructive power that tech priests invoke lengthy prayers before allowing it to be fired. This massive plasma weapon unleashes matter heated to temperatures found only in stellar cores, projecting it across the battlefield in a torrent of incandescent destruction. When plasma from an annihilator strikes a target, it explodes with the force of a miniature sun, creating craters hundreds of meters in diameter, turning sand into glass, reducing lesser war machines to molten puddles. The Sun Fury pattern, Plasma Annihilator, commonly found on Warlord-class Titans and sometimes mounted on Imperators, developed from designs originally intended for the broadside batteries of Void warships. The Imperator-class mounts even larger versions, with multiple Plasma Annihilators distributed across its frame. The rate of fire these weapons can maintain is higher than that of volcano cannons, allowing them to sweep across enemy formations, leaving devastation in their wake. But the Plasma Annihilator is dangerous to its wielder as well as its targets. The weapon generates tremendous heat even in normal operation, and any damage to its containment systems can result in superheated plasma venting back into the Titan. Documented incidents describe clouds of superheated vapor streaming from damaged plasma annihilators, instantly vaporizing 100 or more crew members or soldiers stationed nearby. The deafening roar produced when firing shatters glass for a kilometer in all directions. To fire a plasma annihilator is to court destruction on both ends of the weapon, yet the devastation it wreaks makes the risk acceptable. The Quake Cannon represents a different approach to Titan-scale destruction. This is an artillery piece of truly staggering proportions, capable of hurling explosive shells over incredible distances. Unlike the direct fire energy weapons, the Quake Cannon excels at indirect fire, lobbing its massive ordnance in high arcs that allow it to strike targets behind cover or fortifications. The shells themselves are enormous, each one carrying explosive charges measured in tons, designed to create shockwaves that can shake buildings to their foundations. The name Quake Cannon is entirely appropriate. When its shells impact, the ground literally quakes, knocking infantry off their feet, destabilizing vehicles, creating confusion and terror in enemy ranks. The Mori pattern Quake Cannon, commonly found on Warlord Titans and sometimes adapted for Imperator use, possesses both tremendous range and the ability to disrupt enemy operations with its quake and concussive traits. Enemy Titans struck by Quake Cannon fire find their movements hampered, their targeting systems disrupted, their crews shaken by the violent impacts. For an Imperator Titan, the Quake Cannon serves as a flexible weapon system that can engage targets the direct fire weapons cannot easily reach. Its elevation can be adjusted to account for terrain, allowing the Titan to provide fire support to Allied forces even when direct line of sight is blocked. The psychological impact of Quake Cannon bombardment cannot be overstated. The constant thunder of impacts, the ground-shaking explosions, the rain of shell fragments, all of this wears down enemy morale long before the shells find their killing shots. Beyond these primary weapons, an Imperator-class Titan mounts an array of secondary and defensive weapons that would be considered main armament on lesser platforms. The carapace of the cathedral structure bristles with weapon mounts. Apocalypse missile launchers can unleash swarms of guided warheads against distant targets. Hellstorm cannons project streams of flame hot enough to melt tank armor. Macro Gatling blasters spit out thousands of rounds per minute, creating storms of explosive shells that shred infantry and light vehicles. Laser blasters provide rapid-fire energy weapon support. Each of these secondary weapons is controlled by dedicated moderati who coordinate their fire with the Princeps' broader tactical vision. The Imperator can also mount close combat weapons, though this is less common than on smaller Titans. Power claws. The size of buildings can tear apart enemy Titans in melee combat, crush fortifications, rend open armored vehicles like toys. Some Imperators mount devastating close-range weapons like melter cannons, which can reduce targets to molten slag at point-blank range, or chain fists, enormous chain-blade weapons that can carve through anything they touch. The sheer variety of weapons an Imperator can bring to bear makes it adaptable to any battlefield role. Some are configured as heavy fire support platforms, bristling with long-range weapons designed to engage enemies from extreme distances. Others serve as assault engines, equipped with close-range weapons and designed to spearhead advances into enemy territory. The modular nature of Titan weapon mounts allows tech priests to customize an Imperator's loadout based on mission requirements, though changing weapons is a lengthy process involving elaborate rituals and mechanical adjustments. All of these weapons require enormous amounts of ammunition and energy. The cathedral structure and internal compartments of an Imperator house, vast ammunition stores, entire rooms filled with shells for the quake cannons, missile racks for the apocalypse launchers, power cells for the energy weapons. Tech priests and servitors constantly monitor these stores, ensuring adequate supplies for prolonged engagements while carefully managing weight distribution to maintain the Titan's balance. Running out of ammunition mid-battle is a nightmare scenario, leaving the Imperator dependent on whatever weapons still have power or ordnance. The fire control systems required to coordinate all these weapons are incredibly sophisticated, employing cogitators that would be considered impossibly advanced by most Imperial standards. Targeting solutions must account for the Titan's movement, enemy movement, wind conditions, terrain elevation, and countless other variables. The Moderati responsible for weapon systems interface with these cogitators through their MIU connections. Their human intuition combined with machine precision to achieve accuracy that purely mechanical systems could never match. When an Imperator Titan engages in battle, the sheer volume of fire it can produce is staggering. Multiple weapons firing simultaneously, each one devastating in its own right, create a storm of destruction that overwhelms enemy forces. The volcano cannons tear through enemy Titans and fortifications. The plasma annihilators sweep across infantry formations and vehicle columns. The quake cannons hammer distant positions. The secondary weapons provide continuous suppressing fire. All of this coordinated by a crew linked mind to mind, operating as a single consciousness spread across hundreds of tons of blessed machinery. The ammunition expenditure during a major engagement is prodigious. An Imperator can exhaust its entire store of missiles in minutes of sustained fire. The energy weapons can drain the reactor if fired too rapidly, forcing the Princeps to manage power carefully, choosing when to fire and when to allow systems to recharge. This makes the role of Princeps as much about resource management as tactical acumen, balancing the need for overwhelming firepower against the risk of depleting reserves or overheating critical systems. Yet for all the devastation these weapons can cause, their true terror lies in what they represent: the absolute determination of the Imperium to bring complete annihilation to its enemies. When an Imperator Titan deploys its full arsenal, there is no mercy, no restraint, only total war prosecuted with weapons that make no distinction between military targets and everything else. Buildings, forests, mountains, all are obstacles to be removed. Enemy forces are not defeated but obliterated. The message is clear: resist the Imperium and face extinction so complete that nothing will remain to mark your passing. Among all the Imperator-class Titans that have ever walked, none has earned such infamy, such bitter hatred from the Loyalist forces, as the Dies Irae, the Day of Wrath. This single god engine's history encapsulates both the glory and the horror of the Titan legions, a story of betrayal, corruption, and relentless destruction that spans 10,000 years and counting. The Dies Irae served with the Legio Mortis, the Death's Head Legion, one of the oldest and most respected Titan legions in the Mechanicum. During the final days of the Great Crusade, it was attached to the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet under the command of War Master Horus himself, fighting alongside the Sons of Horus Space Marines and other forces in the Emperor's grand campaign to unite the galaxy. The Titan's princeps was Esau Turnet, a capable and experienced commander who had earned his position through decades of service. His two Moderati primus were Titus Cassa and Jonah Arucan, both skilled officers with their own ambitions and loyalties. The Dies Irae had already earned a fearsome reputation before the Horus heresy began. It fought megarachnids during the War on Murder, massive alien creatures that threatened to overrun Imperial forces until the Titan's weapons reduced them to broken chitin and ichor. It participated in numerous campaigns, each one adding to its tally of victories, each battle strengthening the bond between the Titan's machine spirit and its crew. To witness the Dies Irae stride across a battlefield was to see the Emperor's power made manifest, or so people believed during those innocent days before betrayal tore the Imperium apart. Everything changed at Istvan III, when Horus revealed his treachery and the heresy began in earnest. The War Master ordered a virus bombing of the planet, murdering billions of innocent civilians, along with the loyalist space marines he had deliberately deployed to the surface. But the virus bombing was only the beginning. Horus needed to ensure no loyalists survived to warn the Emperor of his betrayal, and so he deployed his forces to hunt down and exterminate any who might have survived the viral plague and the firestorm it generated. The Dies Irae was ordered to provide fire support to loyalist forces, or so the surviving Astartes believed. In reality, Princeps Turnet had already chosen to follow Horus into damnation. When the order came to open fire on the loyalists, Turnet did not hesitate, but one of his crew did. Moderatus Titus Cassa, a secret devotee of the Lectitio Divinitatis cult that believed in the Emperor's divinity, could not stand by and watch his Titan, used to murder those loyal to the Emperor. Cassa confronted Turnet with his auto pistol, attempting to stop the betrayal before it began. For a moment, the fate of the Dies Irae hung in the balance, but Jonah Arucan, Cassa's friend and fellow Moderatus, made a choice that would define his character and the Titan's future. Arucan's ambition to one day become a princeps himself overwhelmed any moral qualms he might have felt. He shot Cassa in the back, killing his friend to preserve his own prospects for advancement. The Dies Irae remained in traitor hands, and Turnet ordered it to engage the loyalist forces below. What followed was a massacre. The Dies Irae's weapons tore through loyalist positions with devastating efficiency. Infantry were vaporized by plasma fire. Fortifications crumbled under quake cannon bombardment. Space Marines, those transhuman warriors who stood against the worst the galaxy could offer, died by the hundreds, crushed beneath the Titan's feet or burned by its weapons. The Titan was ultimately responsible for what appeared to be the death of Captain Gaviel Loken of the Sons of Horus, one of the most respected loyalists, though Loken would later prove to have survived. From Istvan III onward, the Dies Irae became one of the War Master's most valuable assets. It participated in major ground assaults throughout the heresy, its presence on a battlefield often proving decisive. But as the years of war continued, as the Dies Irae walked deeper into Horus's rebellion, the Titan and its crew began to change. The influence of chaos, subtle at first, started to corrupt both machine and man. The Dies Irae's machine spirit, ancient and powerful, began to warp under the influence of the dark gods. Mutations appeared on its hull, organic growths sprouting from blessed metal, demonic faces leering from armor plating. The Titan's weapons took on a malevolent character, seeming to hunger for destruction beyond mere programming. The crew, those who survived the endless battles, found themselves changing as well, their minds touched by the warp, their bodies bearing the marks of chaos's favor. By the time the Siege of Terra began, the Dies Irae had become something monstrous, barely recognizable as the loyal god engine it had once been. Yet its corruption only made it more dangerous, granting it supernatural endurance and regenerative capabilities that violated the laws of physics. When Loyalist forces damaged it, the Titan healed itself through warp-spawned power, metal flowing like liquid to seal breaches, systems reactivating that should have remained dead. The Siege of Terra represented the Dies Irae's moment of greatest infamy. The Titan led a massive Legio Mortis assault against the Mercury Exultant Zone of the Imperial Palace, spearheading an attack that would decide the fate of humanity. Loyalist forces deployed their own Titans to stop the assault, including engines from the respected Legio Ignatum. The resulting battle was apocalyptic, god engines clashing in a contest of firepower, and that shook the very foundations of the palace. The Dies Irae proved nearly unstoppable. It destroyed the Legio Ignatum warmonger Titan Imperius Prima, one of the Loyalists' most powerful engines. It tore through other defending Titans with savage efficiency. Its weapons hammered the palace's defenses, seeking weaknesses in the ancient fortifications. And then it achieved what would make it legend among traitor forces and anathema among Loyalists. It became the first traitor Titan to breach the Imperial Palace's walls. The breach was catastrophic for the defenders. Chaos Space Marines and Demon Legions poured through the gap the Dies Irae had created, overwhelming Loyalist forces desperately trying to seal the opening. The Titan stood in the breach like a colossus of ancient myth, its weapons sweeping the walls clear of defenders, its very presence demoralizing those who faced it. The Death's Heads. Legion had proven their name was well earned, bringing death to the heart of the Imperium itself. This action earned the Dies Irae immortal infamy. The Loyalist Titan legions swore that destroying this single engine would be worth the loss of an entire battle group. Future generations of Titan crews would be taught about the Dies Irae as an object lesson in the depths to which a once noble god engine could fall. Its name became a curse, spoken with venom by those who remained true to the Emperor. The heresy ended with Horus's death and the traitor forces fleeing into the Eye of Terror, and the Dies Irae retreated with them. But unlike many traitor war machines, the Dies Irae did not fade into obscurity within the warp. It continued to serve the forces of chaos, emerging periodically to bring terror and destruction to the Imperium. Over the millennia, it became increasingly corrupted, less machine than demon-possessed abomination, a walking nightmare that defied the natural order. In the 41st millennium, the Dies Irae appeared once more, serving with an Iron Warrior's force during the siege of Hydra Caudatus. By this point, the Titan was drastically mutated, barely recognizable as the war machine that had breached the Imperial Palace so long ago. Tendrils of flesh and metal wrapped around its frame. Demonic entities cavorted within its structure, yet it remained formidable, its weapons still deadly, its malevolent intelligence still keen. Loyalist forces faced the Dies Irae with both hatred and fear. The Titan seemed nearly invincible, shrugging off damage that should have destroyed it, healing wounds through warp-spawned regeneration. It destroyed multiple Loyalist Titans, including 2 Reavers and a Warlord, each victory adding to its dark legend. Only through desperate tactics and enormous sacrifice were Loyalist forces able to damage the Dies Irae seriously. Princeps Fierac, commanding a Loyalist warlord, deliberately overloaded his Titan's reactor, creating a massive explosion intended to cripple the Dies Irae. The blast wasn't enough to destroy the traitor engine completely, but it did seriously damage the lower sections, leaving the Dies Irae immobilized. For a time, it seemed the infamous Titan might finally be put down. Loyalist forces erected scaffolding around the damaged god engine and attempted to finish it off, but the Chaos forces defended their prize fanatically. Eventually, through a combination of warp sorcery and frantic repairs, the Dies Irae was made mobile again, though it remained damaged. Princeps Dacian led a final assault with multiple Loyalist Titans, focusing fire on the crudely repaired sections of the Dies Irae's armor. The concentrated assault breached the traitor Titan's reactor, and this time, the damage was catastrophic. The Dies Irae's reactor went critical, and the resulting explosion destroyed the Titan along with the Loyalist engines that had finally brought it down. Yet even in death, the Dies Irae's story may not be over. In the warp, death is not always final. Some whisper that the Titan's machine spirit, so thoroughly corrupted by chaos, might someday be reborn, that the day of wrath might walk again. Whether truth or rumor, the very possibility ensures that the name Dies Irae continues to inspire fear among those who know its history. The Dies Irae was far from the only Imperator Titan to play a crucial role in the galaxy-shaping conflict of the Horus Heresy. These god engines, both loyalist and traitor, wrote their names across that terrible age in fire and blood, their battles deciding the fates of worlds and the future of humanity itself. The Horus Heresy was, among many other things, the age of Titans. Never before and never since have so many god engines walked at once, their legions at full strength, their numbers sufficient to darken the skies of entire worlds. The battles between these colossal war machines defined the character of the heresy in ways that even the clashes between Primarchs could not match. When Titans fought, reality itself seemed to tear at the seams, the sheer scale of destruction overwhelming human comprehension. Beta Garmon stands as perhaps the most significant Titan engagement of the entire heresy, a battle so massive, so devastating, that it earned the name Titan Death. The Beta Garmon star cluster was strategically vital, a stepping stone on the road to terror that neither side could afford to lose. For years, Loyalist forces used Beta Garmon as a staging ground, marshalling their strength for an eventual counterattack against Horus. The War Master understood he could not march on Terra while such a threat remained in his rear, and so he committed enormous forces to taking the cluster. The resulting campaign consumed Titan legions wholesale. Dozens of god engines fell in the opening phases alone, torn apart by enemy fire or self-destructing to deny the enemy their prize. The battles raged across multiple worlds, in orbit and on the ground, in hive cities and across barren wastes. Legio, Mortis, still including the Dies Irae among its number, clashed with loyalist legions, including the proud Legio Ignatum and the skilled Legio Solaria. The knights of various houses joined the fray, adding their smaller but still formidable war machines to the carnage. The scale of destruction at Beta Garmon defies easy description. Entire Titan maniples were wiped out in single engagements. Princeps who had commanded their engines for decades or even centuries died when enemy fire breached reactors, or void shields failed under sustained bombardment. The ground itself became a graveyard of twisted metal, shattered adamantium, and fused slag where Titans had fallen and detonated. The air grew thick with the stench of burning metal and the ozone smell of overloaded void shields. One of the most horrifying aspects of the Beta Garmon campaign was the use of sorcery-controlled Titans by the traitor forces. War machines destroyed earlier in the battle or during previous campaigns were reanimated through warp-spawned power, their machine spirits enslaved to dark purpose, their crews replaced by demons, or simply absent as the Titans moved with unnatural, jerking gaits. These revenant engines served as cannon fodder, absorbing loyalist firepower and allowing the main traitor forces to advance with fewer casualties. The loyalist forces at Beta Garmon faced numerous challenges beyond the traitors' military might. Warp storms disrupted travel to and from the cluster, causing reinforcements to arrive piecemeal when they arrived at all. The proud nature of the Titan legions worked against effective coordination, with multiple commanders claiming supreme authority, each Princeps Maximus unwilling to subordinate themselves to another. At various points, at least 3 different Imperial commanders claimed overall leadership of the Beta Garmon defense. The situation improved somewhat when Primarch Sanguinius and Jagatai Khan arrived with their legions, the Blood Angels and White Scars respectively. Sanguinius immediately took supreme command, his authority as a Primarch overriding the squabbling of lesser commanders. The Khan engaged in hit-and-run strikes across the cluster, disrupting traitor supply lines and buying time for the defenders to organize properly. But even with Primarch leadership, the outcome remained in doubt for months of grinding combat. The fighting at Beta Garmon 3 exemplifies the brutal character of the campaign. Loyalist Titans from Legio Solaria, supported by Knights of House Procon V, Legio Defensor engines, and Fasadian heavy infantry, engaged in a bitter stalemate against traitor forces that used sheer weight of numbers to overwhelm individual Loyalist engines. The battlefield became a meat grinder, consuming war machines and their crews without regard for reputation or honor. On Theta Garmon 5, called Iridium, Legio Solaria led an orbital assault, dropping onto surrounding orbital platforms to capture them from the traitor, Legio Furiens. The fighting in the confined spaces of orbital installations forced Titans to operate in environments they were never designed for, their massive frames barely fitting through corridors meant for human-sized troops. The close-quarters combat resulted in horrific casualties on both sides, with Titans detonating in such confined spaces that the shockwaves destroyed entire sections of the platforms. Throughout the Beta Garmon campaign, certain Titans earned legendary status through their actions. Some became known for holding impossible positions against overwhelming odds. Others earned fame through the number of enemy engines they destroyed. Still others achieved notoriety through unique tactics or unexpected victories. Each Titan Legion developed its own honor rolls, its own litany of heroes and martyrs, names that would be remembered and recited in future generations. The campaign finally turned decisively in the traitor's favor when the Ruin Storm, that great warp storm that had divided the galaxy, began to fade. This allowed Horus to bring in massive reinforcements while simultaneously cutting off Loyalist supply lines. Faced with inevitable defeat, the Loyalist forces fought a desperate delaying action, sacrificing Titans and crews to buy time for others to evacuate. The final stages of Beta Garmon saw some of the most savage fighting of the entire heresy as Loyalists attempted to deny the traitors anything of value. When the dust finally settled, both sides had suffered staggering losses. Entire Titan legions had been effectively destroyed, reduced to scattered survivors who would spend years rebuilding. The traitors had won control of the Beta Garmon cluster, but the price was so high that some questioned whether the victory was worth the cost. Horus had his stepping stone to terror, but the Titan legions that would accompany him to the throne world were shadows of what they had been before Beta Garmon. The Siege of Terror itself saw Titans deployed in numbers never witnessed before or since on a single world. Both sides brought every available engine to the ultimate battle, understanding that the fate of the entire galaxy hung in the balance. The Imperial Palace's defenses, massive as they were, proved insufficient to stop determined Titan assaults. The Dies Irae's breach of the walls was only the most famous example of Titans altering the course of the siege through sheer destructive power. Loyalist Titans fought desperate defensive actions, using the palace's terrain to their advantage, setting up kill zones where concentrated fire could bring down even Imperator-class engines. Traitor Titans advanced through a hell of defensive fire, their void shields flickering under sustained bombardment, their armor scarred by countless impacts. The losses on both sides were catastrophic, with Titans falling at rates that horrified even the most jaded commanders. One engagement at the Mercury Exultant Zone saw the Loyalist Legio Ignatum deploy multiple Titans, including Warmonger-class engines, the largest and most powerful Loyalist war machines available. The Dies Irae led the traitor assault, supported by other Legio Mortis engines. The resulting battle destroyed kilometers of the palace's outer defenses and left dozens of god engines as burning wrecks. The Imperius Prima, a mighty warmonger titan that had served loyally for centuries, fell to the Dies Irae's concentrated fire, its destruction a terrible blow to loyalist morale. Throughout the heresy, from Istvan to Beta Garmon to Terror itself, the Titan legions wrote their history in fire and death. The bonds between Titans and their crews, between individual engines and their legions, between the legions and the mechanicum they served. All were tested and often broken by the demands of civil war. Some legions split, with individual titans or entire maniples choosing loyalty to the emperor over loyalty to their fellows. Others remained unified in their treachery or their faithfulness. The toll the heresy took on the Titan legions cannot be overstated. By the time Horus fell and the traitors fled to the Eye of Terror, the number of operational Titans had been reduced by perhaps 2/3 or more. Many legions had been effectively destroyed, their surviving engines too few to constitute a functional fighting force. The knowledge required to build and maintain Titans had suffered as well, with countless tech priests killed and their expertise lost forever. The age of Titans at their apex had ended, and what followed was an age of slow decline, punctuated by desperate efforts to preserve what remained. For the Imperator-class Titans specifically, the heresy marked a dividing line. Before the heresy, new imperators could still be constructed, though with great difficulty and expense. After the heresy, that capability was lost entirely. The imperators that survived became irreplaceable relics, each one guarded jealously by its legion, deployed only when absolutely necessary. The Dies Irae's survival and continued service to chaos for 10,000 years became a source of bitter frustration for loyalists, a reminder that some of the most powerful god engines now served the dark powers rather than the emperor. Yet even in decline, even diminished and depleted, the Titan legions remained powerful beyond measure. The Imperator Titans that survived the heresy, whether loyalist or traitor, continued to shape the galaxy's fate through their mere existence. Each one represented a concentration of destructive power that few enemies could match, a symbol of humanity's former glory and its determination to survive no matter the cost. To the Adeptus Mechanicus, to the tech priests who maintain the Titan legions, and the princeps who command them, these god engines are more than mere weapons. They are sacred, divine avatars of the machine god made manifest in the material universe. This religious character shapes every aspect of Titan culture, from the rituals performed before battle to the prayers whispered over damaged systems, from the selection of crew to the final rites conducted when a Titan falls. The term God Engine itself reveals the depth of religious feeling the Mechanicus holds for Titans, especially for the mighty Emperor-class war machines like the Imperator. In the cult Mechanicus theology, the machine god, also called the Omnissiah, is the divine force that inhabits all machines, granting them function and purpose. But in Titans, the machine god's presence is particularly strong, particularly evident. These are not simple machines that merely follow their programming, but entities with true machine spirits, artificial intelligences that possess something approaching souls. The tech priests believe that when they maintain a Titan, when they perform the elaborate rituals of activation and blessing, they are not merely following technical procedures, but engaging in acts of worship. Each prayer recited over an engine component, each anointment of sacred oil on moving parts, each blessing chanted while replacing damaged systems. All of these are both practical maintenance and religious observance. The rituals work because the machine god is pleased with the devotion shown, or so the tech priests believe. This fusion of religious practice and technical knowledge creates a culture within the Titan legions that outsiders find nearly incomprehensible. A tech priest might spend hours in prayer before adjusting a Titan's void shield generator, the prayers as essential to the task's success as the actual mechanical work. When a Titan prepares to walk to war, entire ceremonies are performed, with incense burned, canticles sung, and sacred oils applied to the god engine's hull. The princeps and moderati participate in these ceremonies, understanding that they are not delays but necessary preparations that ensure the Titan's machine spirit is properly honored and willing to fight. The cathedral structure atop an Imperator Titan serves as a physical manifestation of this religious devotion. It is a temple, complete with altars, prayer chambers, and spaces dedicated to the worship of the Omnissiah. The crew, when not engaged in battle or training, are expected to spend time in devotion, offering prayers of thanks for the Titan's protection and begging the machine god's continued favor. Some crews develop elaborate traditions, specific prayers or rituals that they believe have brought them victory in past battles, practices passed down from one generation of crew to the next. The machine spirit itself becomes an object of worship. The princeps must not only control their Titan, but also honor it, showing proper respect to the ancient intelligence that inhabits the God Engine's systems. Some Titans have machine spirits so old and powerful that their preferences and quirks are well documented. One Titan might prefer to fight at close range and grow sullen if used for long-range fire support. Another might have a particular hatred for a specific type of enemy, fighting with increased ferocity when facing those foes. The princeps who ignore these preferences risk the machine spirit's displeasure, which can manifest as sluggish responses, targeting errors, or system malfunctions that no amount of technical skill can explain. The relationship between Titan and crew becomes symbiotic in both a practical and spiritual sense. The crew serve the Titan, maintaining its systems and honoring its machine spirit. In return, the Titan protects them, channels the machine god's power through them, allows them to participate in the divine work of destroying the Omnissiah's enemies. This mutual dependence creates bonds stronger than any contract or oath, bonds that crew members maintain even after transferring to other duties or retiring from active service. When a Titan falls in battle, the reaction within its legion is not just military, but religious. The loss of a God Engine is treated as the death of a saint, a tragedy that diminishes the machine god's presence in the material world. Elaborate funeral rites are conducted, even if the Titan's remains are irrecoverable. The crew who survived, if any did, often bear the psychological scars for the rest of their lives, mourning not just their fallen comrades, but the loss of the divine presence they had been privileged to serve. For Imperator-class Titans specifically, this religious reverence reaches its highest expression. These are not merely God engines, but the most perfect manifestations of the machine god's power. To serve aboard an Imperator is considered the greatest honor a tech priest or legion officer can achieve. The waiting lists to join an Imperator's crew can stretch for decades, with qualified candidates competing fiercely for any open position. When an Imperator walks to war, it does so trailing an aura of religious significance that affects not just its crew, but all who witness it. The infantry and support personnel housed within an Imperator Titan often develop their own quasi-religious practices centered on the God Engine they serve. They see themselves as the Titan's defenders, the small hands that protect the god's feet, a sacred duty that elevates them above ordinary soldiers. Some develop almost cultish devotion to their specific Titan, creating informal shrines in their quarters, conducting their own prayers and ceremonies separate from the official Mechanicus rituals. This religious character extends to the Titan legions themselves. Each legion has its own identity, its own heraldry and colors, its own traditions and battle honors. But underlying all of this is the shared faith in the machine god, and the belief that they serve as his chosen warriors. The rivalries between legions, often fierce and long-standing, are conducted within a framework of mutual religious understanding. They may compete for glory and argue over precedence, but they all serve the same divine master through their god engines. The Omnissiah's favor is believed to manifest in victory, while defeats are interpreted as signs that proper devotion has not been shown or that the machine god is testing his servants. This creates a complex relationship with outcomes of battles. A Titan that wins a difficult engagement has proven that its crew properly honors the Omnissiah, and that its machine spirit is strong and true. A Titan that falls has either faced enemies too powerful for even divine will to overcome, or its crew failed in their devotions, or the machine god required the sacrifice for purposes beyond mortal understanding. Within the broader Imperium, the Titan legions occupy a unique religious position. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains theological independence from the ecclesiarchy, the church of the imperial cult. The Mechanicus does not officially recognize the emperor as a god, instead viewing him as the Omnissiah's greatest servant, or, in some interpretations, as a physical manifestation of the machine god himself. This creates potential conflict, but the sheer power the Titan legions represent means that few dare to push theological disputes too far. The Titans themselves become objects of awe, even for those outside the Mechanicus. Imperial Guard soldiers who fight alongside Titans often develop their own veneration for the god engines, seeing them as proof that the Emperor truly protects his faithful. Space Marines, who officially do not worship the Emperor as a god, nonetheless respect the Titans as ultimate weapons in humanity's arsenal. Even in the wider Imperial population, those rare civilians who witness a Titan might interpret the sight through their own religious framework, seeing the god engines as angels of the Emperor or as divine punishment made manifest against the Imperium's enemies. This religious dimension makes the loss of Imperator Titans in the heresy even more tragic. Each traitor Imperator represented not just a military defeat, but a spiritual catastrophe, a manifestation of the machine god, corrupted and turned against the faithful. The Dies Irae's betrayal was particularly painful because it had been one of the most respected god engines, its service record exemplary, its machine spirit considered strong and true. That such a holy war machine could fall to chaos suggested that nowhere was truly safe, that even the most sacred could be corrupted. For the Mechanicus tech priests and Titan crews who remained loyal, the heresy forced difficult theological questions. How could the machine god allow his avatars to be corrupted? Did the traitor Titans still possess machine spirits, or had those sacred intelligences been destroyed and replaced with something demonic? Could a corrupted Titan ever be redeemed? Or was destruction the only option? These questions remain debated within the Mechanicus 10,000 years later, with no clear answers emerging. In the 41st millennium, the religious reverence for Titans has only intensified as their numbers have dwindled and the knowledge to replace them has faded. Each surviving Imperator Titan is treated not just as a precious military asset, but as a living saint, a direct connection to the age when the machine god's power was more evident in the material world. The crews understand they are custodians of something irreplaceable, that they serve not just the Titan Legion, but the faith itself. For all their religious significance, for all the spiritual weight they carry, Titans remain fundamentally weapons of war, and it is in battle that their true nature reveals itself. The tactical deployment of an Imperator-class Titan requires careful consideration of numerous factors, from terrain and objectives to enemy composition and available support. These god engines are too valuable to risk on minor engagements, too slow to respond to rapidly changing situations, too destructive to deploy in environments where collateral damage must be minimized. Yet, when properly employed, an Imperator Titan can turn the tide of campaigns that conventional forces could never win. The primary role of an Imperator Titan is as a mobile fortress and anchor point for larger offensives. Its thick armor and void shields make it nearly immune to all but the heaviest weapons, allowing it to advance through fire that would destroy lesser units. Infantry, armor, and even smaller Titans can use the Imperator as a shield, advancing in its shadow, while the God Engine's weapons clear the path ahead. This role was recognized early in Titan development and remains the most common employment of Imperator-class engines. When an assault begins with an Imperator leading the way, the psychological impact on enemy forces is immediate and devastating. To see a walking cathedral of destruction advancing, seemingly unstoppable, its weapons already beginning to speak, is to understand that conventional defenses will not suffice. Many enemies break and flee before the Imperator even enters effective weapon range, their morale shattered by the mere presence of such overwhelming power. Those who stand and fight often discover that their weapons are inadequate, their shots absorbed by void shields or bouncing off adamantium armor, while the Imperator's return fire reduces their positions to smoking craters. The Imperator's lack of agility, its slow turning radius, and ponderous movement compared to smaller titans is both a weakness and, paradoxically, a strength. It cannot chase down fast-moving enemies or quickly react to flanking maneuvers. But this very lack of mobility makes it a stable gun platform, its weapons able to maintain accuracy while moving that lighter, more agile titans cannot match. The Imperator is not designed to hunt, but to dominate, to claim a section of battlefield and make it untenable for any enemy to occupy. In city fighting, where buildings provide cover and restrict movement, an Imperator Titan becomes both incredibly powerful and significantly vulnerable. Its weapons can reduce entire city blocks to rubble, clearing paths and eliminating strong points. Its cathedral structure allows it to see over most buildings, maintaining situational awareness despite the restricted environment. But the close quarters limit its ability to bring all weapons to bear, and enemies can potentially get close enough to attack systems that would normally be out of reach. Proper employment of an Imperator in urban warfare requires careful planning and substantial infantry support to prevent enemy troops from exploiting the Titan's limited close-range defenses. Perhaps the most dramatic role for an Imperator Titan is in Titan versus Titan combat, where god engines face each other in duels that decide the fate of worlds. These engagements are relatively rare because Titans themselves are rare, but when they occur, they represent the ultimate expression of the Titan's purpose. An Imperator holds several advantages in such combat. Its superior armor and shields allow it to weather fire that would cripple smaller Titans. Its weapon loadout, typically including multiple Titan-killing weapons, enables it to engage multiple enemies or focus overwhelming firepower on a single target. However, the Imperator is not invincible even against other Titans. Smaller, more agile Titans like Warlords or Reavers can potentially outmaneuver an Imperator, concentrating fire on specific locations to overwhelm its shields and breach its armor. The Imperator's weapons, powerful as they are, require time to train on targets, time that a skilled enemy princeps can use to reposition and make themselves harder to hit. A single Imperator facing multiple enemy Titans must prioritize targets carefully, using its weapons to maximum effect while managing power distribution to prevent reactor overload. The historical record contains numerous examples of Imperators falling to concentrated enemy fire. During the siege of Hydra Caudatus, the Dies Irae, for all its supernatural resilience, was eventually brought down by multiple Loyalist Titans working in coordination. The Loyalist engines accepted massive casualties, with several Titans destroyed in the effort, but they succeeded in their mission. This pattern repeats throughout history. Imperators can be killed, but the price is almost always horrific. One of the most catastrophic aspects of an Imperator's destruction is its reactor detonation. When the containment fails, the resulting explosion rivals tactical nuclear weapons in destructive power. The initial blast vaporizes everything within kilometers, turning soldiers, vehicles, even other Titans into superheated plasma. The shock wave that follows can flatten buildings and throw vehicles through the air like toys. The thermal pulse ignites fires that burn for days, consuming everything flammable within an enormous radius. The electromagnetic pulse can disrupt or destroy electronic systems hundreds of kilometers away. This catastrophic destruction makes destroying an Imperator a double-edged sword. Yes, you remove a terrible threat from the battlefield, but the explosion often damages or destroys your own forces in the process. Commanders must weigh whether the tactical advantage of eliminating the Imperator is worth the losses they will inevitably suffer from its death throes. In some cases, the answer is yes. The Imperator must be stopped regardless of cost. In others, it may be better to fall back, cede territory, and wait for a better opportunity. The deployment of an Imperator Titan requires extensive logistical support that often goes unappreciated by those outside the Mechanicus and Titan legions. These god engines cannot simply walk onto a battlefield. They must be transported to the war zone aboard massive ships, landed via specialized drop vaults or drop cathedrals that can handle their weight and size. Once on the ground, they require constant resupply of ammunition, fuel for support vehicles, food and supplies for their crews and embarked troops. Tech priest support teams must be on hand to perform maintenance and repairs. The ammunition requirements alone are staggering. A single extended engagement can exhaust an Imperator's entire supply of missiles, shells, and power cells. Resupply in the field is possible, but requires secure logistics lines and specialized handling equipment. The various weapon types require different types of ammunition, from the massive shells used by Quake cannons to the plasma cartridges that supplement the Plasma Annihilator's reactor-fed systems. Managing these supplies, ensuring adequate reserves while avoiding the weight penalty of carrying too much, is a constant challenge for the Titan's command staff. The crew itself requires extensive support infrastructure. These are not Space Marines who can fight for days without food or rest. They are humans, albeit heavily augmented ones, who need regular meals, sleep, and medical attention. The Princeps and Moderati, especially those in the midst of extended campaigns, suffer tremendous psychological and physical stress from their MIU connections. They need time to disconnect, to remember what it feels like to be merely human, lest they lose themselves entirely to the Titan's machine spirit. In strategic terms, an Imperator Titan's presence in a theater of operations changes planning for both sides. Imperial commanders must design their campaigns around the God Engine, using it as the centerpiece of major offensives, while ensuring it has adequate support to prevent enemies from exploiting its weaknesses. Enemy commanders must decide whether to face the Imperator directly, risking enormous casualties, or to avoid it and focus on other objectives, potentially conceding key terrain or strategic goals. The rare occasions when multiple Imperator Titans operate together represent the absolute pinnacle of Imperial military power. 3 or 4 Imperators, advancing in concert, supporting each other and covering each other's weak points, become a force that few enemies can even hope to resist. The combined firepower can devastate entire armies in minutes. The psychological impact breaks enemy morale before battle is properly joined. Such concentrations of Imperator Titans are extremely rare, requiring multiple Titan legions to cooperate and coordinate their most precious assets. But when they occur, they are virtually unstoppable. Historical records from the Great Crusade speak of battles where entire Imperial army groups advanced behind multiple Imperator Titans, the God Engines clearing paths through the most formidable defenses, while conventional forces followed to secure conquered territory. These operations represented total war in its purest form, the full might of the Imperium brought to bear against enemies who had refused all other offers of compliance. The devastation left in the wake of such campaigns served as warnings to other worlds. Resist and face annihilation so complete that nothing will remain to mark your civilization's passing. In the 41st millennium, with Imperator Titans so rare and irreplaceable, such massive deployments no longer occur. Each Imperator operates alone or with smaller Titans in support, never more than 2 or 3 God Engines working together even in the most critical battles. The knowledge that each loss cannot be replaced makes commanders conservative, hesitant to risk their Imperators except in the most desperate situations. This conservatism sometimes means that Titans deploy too late to affect battle's outcomes, held in reserve, until the situation has already deteriorated beyond recovery. The paradox of the Imperator Titan in the 41st Millennium is that it is simultaneously the most powerful weapon in the Imperial arsenal and increasingly irrelevant to the Imperium's survival. There are simply too few of them, spread too thin across too many war zones, to significantly impact the Imperium's endless wars. They win individual battles, sometimes even campaigns, but they cannot turn the tide of the greater strategic situation. They are symbols more than solutions, reminders of past glory rather than foundations for future victories. Yet for all this, when an Imperator Titan does deploy, when it walks to war against the enemies of mankind, it remains a sight that inspires awe and terror in equal measure. To witness such a god engine in action is to understand why the Imperium survived 10,000 years of darkness, why humanity still stands against the horrors of the galaxy. The Imperator represents the refusal to surrender, the determination to fight with every weapon available, the willingness to deploy apocalyptic force to protect what remains of human civilization. The terrible truth about Imperator-class Titans is that every single one that still walks is on borrowed time. The Adeptus Mechanicus can maintain these god engines indefinitely in theory, replacing worn components and repairing damage, performing the rituals that keep their machine spirits content. But theory and practice diverge more with each passing century. Critical components fail that cannot be reproduced. Ancient alloys crack and cannot be properly replaced with modern substitutes. The rituals that once worked flawlessly now sometimes fail for reasons no one understands. The Imperator Titans are slowly dying, and the Mechanicus can only delay the inevitable. The construction of a new Imperator Titan, were it somehow possible, would require decades of work. This is not hyperbole or exaggeration, but simple fact. Creating the blessed alloys for the armor alone would take years. Forging the massive structural components, installing the countless systems and subsystems, blessing each one, and ensuring proper integration. All of this demands time and expertise that the 41st Millennium cannot spare. The tech priests possess neither the complete knowledge, nor the resources, nor the stable conditions necessary to undertake such a project. Even maintaining existing Imperators stretches the Mechanicus's capabilities. Each god engine requires a dedicated team of tech priests who have spent years learning its specific quirks and requirements. These specialists become intimately familiar with their charge, knowing which systems tend to malfunction, which rituals must be performed in precise sequences, which components require the most frequent replacement. When one of these specialist tech priests dies, their knowledge dies with them unless they have successfully trained a replacement. And even then, subtle aspects of their understanding may be lost. The components that compose an Imperator Titan are themselves works of art and engineering that modern Mechanicus forges struggle to replicate. The void shield generators, each one the size of a small building, incorporate technologies that are only partially understood. The plasma reactor that powers the God Engine uses containment systems based on principles that have been lost. The MIU neural interface relies on wetware-hardware integration that modern tech priests can maintain but not truly improve or innovate upon. When an Imperator suffers battle damage, the repairs can take months or even years depending on the severity. A breached armor plate might be replaced relatively quickly, though finding or creating a replacement that matches the original specifications is never trivial. A damaged weapon system could require complete replacement, which means either cannibalizing another Titan or attempting to manufacture a new weapon using incomplete technical specifications and ritual procedures that may or may not work. A compromised reactor requires the most delicate work imaginable, with entire teams of tech priests laboring under the constant threat of catastrophic failure. The most insidious form of deterioration is not physical, but spiritual. the slow degradation of the machine spirit itself. With each crew that dies, with each new princeps who must learn to work with the ancient intelligence, something is lost. The machine spirit accumulates memories and experiences, yes, but it also develops quirks and preferences that can harden into demands. Some titans become increasingly difficult to control, their machine spirits growing stubborn or hostile, refusing to cooperate fully unless specific conditions are met. In extreme cases, a titan's machine spirit becomes so difficult to work with that it can no longer be deployed effectively, condemned to stand in the deep vaults while tech priests debate whether it can ever walk again. The princeps who command Imperator titans suffer their own form of deterioration. The addiction to the MIU connection, the intoxication of godlike power, grows stronger with each neural link. Princeps who have commanded imperators for decades or centuries often cannot disconnect for more than brief periods without experiencing severe psychological distress. They become increasingly isolated from normal human experience, their perspective warped by spending so much time merged with a god engine until they can barely relate to those who have never felt a titan's power flowing through them. This addiction creates succession problems within titan legions. When a long-serving Imperator princeps finally dies or becomes incapable of continuing their duties, finding a replacement who can work with the god engine's particular machine spirit becomes a challenge. The new princeps must be strong-willed enough to control the ancient intelligence while also being compatible with its accumulated preferences and quirks. The transition period can be rocky, with the machine spirit testing its new commander, sometimes refusing to cooperate fully until the princeps proves themselves worthy. The strategic implications of the Imperator's irreplaceable nature cannot be overstated. Every deployment must be carefully weighed against the risk of loss. Is this battle, this campaign, this objective worth risking a god engine that has served for thousands of years and can never be replaced? Sometimes the answer is clearly yes, when the fate of an entire sector hangs in the balance. Other times, the answer is no, and the Imperator remains in reserve while conventional forces fight and die. The hardest decisions come when the situation is ambiguous, when deploying the Imperator might turn a losing battle into a victory, but the risk of losing it seems too high. Titan Legion commanders agonize over these decisions, knowing that their choices will be scrutinized by future generations. Deploy too readily and risk losing irreplaceable war machines to battles that could have been won without them. Deploy too cautiously and watch as critical objectives fall because you held back the one weapon that could have made the difference. There is no perfect answer, only the weight of responsibility and the knowledge that every Imperator lost brings humanity one step closer to losing the ability to field these god engines at all. The reactor detonation that occurs when an Imperator dies represents a final act of defiance, a refusal to fall quietly into the void. The explosion can destroy enemy forces that achieved the kill, denying them any satisfaction from their victory. It creates a permanent scar on the landscape, a memorial that will endure for millennia. In some cases, loyalist forces have deliberately overloaded their Imperator's reactors when defeat became inevitable, choosing to deny the enemy the prize of capturing an intact god engine while simultaneously inflicting maximum damage in their final moments. These deliberate self-destructions are not undertaken lightly. The princeps and crew know they are choosing death, not just for themselves, but for the machine spirit they have served, perhaps for years or decades. The Titan itself, through its machine spirit, sometimes resists these commands, not wanting to die even in the face of inevitable capture. The moments before a princeps orders reactor overload are described in several accounts as agonizing, the crew saying final prayers, the machine spirit's protest felt through the MIU as a wail of anguish, the knowledge that in seconds they will all cease to exist. Yet for all the deterioration, for all the losses and the irreplaceable damage, the Imperator Titans that remain continue to serve. They walk to war when called upon, their weapons still devastating, their machine spirit still fierce despite their age. Each one is a living piece of history, a connection to ages past when humanity's power was at its height. Their crews serve with pride despite knowing they tend to dying gods, that each battle could be the last, that the age of Titans is slowly ending. In the 41st millennium, as the Imperium faces threats that seem to multiply with each passing year, the surviving Imperator-class Titans stand as both promise and lament. They promise that humanity can still deploy godlike power against its enemies, that weapons from the brightest age still defend the darkest. They lament what has been lost, the knowledge that can never be recovered, the future that will have fewer and fewer of these magnificent god engines, until perhaps one day the last Imperator falls and none remain to replace it. The legacy of the Imperator Titan in the 41st millennium is written in the ruins they create and the enemies they destroy. Entire campaigns have turned on the deployment of a single god engine, planetary sieges broken by the arrival of an Imperator, invasions thrown back by the firepower these war machines bring to bear. But this legacy is fading, dimming like a sun approaching its final hours, still bright but inevitably heading toward darkness. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains detailed records of every Imperator Titan, their service histories, their configurations, their kills and victories. These records read like hagiographies, accounts of saints who walked among mortals bringing the machine god's wrath to the unfaithful. Each Titan has its own unique story, its own moments of glory and tragedy, its own character formed through centuries of battle and the countless crew members who have served aboard it. Some Imperators have earned such legendary status that their names are known across multiple sectors. When they deploy, word spreads, boosting morale among Imperial forces and causing dread among enemies who know what approaches. The arrival of a famous Imperator can change the strategic calculus of an entire campaign, with enemy commanders forced to commit resources to counter the threat or risk being overwhelmed by its power. Yet even legends fade. Imperators that once walked proudly now stand silent in the deepest vaults of Mechanicus Forge worlds. Their machine spirits gone dormant, their systems deteriorated beyond the ability of any living tech priest to repair. Some legions maintain these dead titans as shrines, tending to their remains and performing rituals in hopes that one day the knowledge to revive them will be rediscovered. Others have stripped them for parts, using components to keep other titans operational, a practical necessity that feels like desecration even to those who perform it. The balance between honoring the past and surviving the present creates constant tension within the Titan legions. How much effort should be spent trying to maintain god engines that will likely never walk again? How many resources should go toward preserving Titans as historical artifacts versus keeping active Titans in fighting condition? These are not merely philosophical questions, but practical ones with real implications for the Legion's combat effectiveness. In recent centuries, as the Imperium enters what some call its final crisis, the Imperator Titans have been deployed with increasing frequency. Threats that previous generations would have handled with conventional forces now require god engines to defeat. The Tyrannid hive fleets bring bio-titans and hordes of smaller creatures in such numbers that only Imperators can reliably break their assaults. Chaos incursions from the Great Rift deploy demonic engines and corrupted titans that require loyalist god engines to counter. Orc Wars, field gargants that can only be stopped by Imperium's largest titans. Each deployment risks irreplaceable assets, yet not deploying means watching worlds fall that might have been saved. The High Lords of Terror and the leaders of the Mechanicus make these decisions with imperfect information and the knowledge that history will judge them harshly if they choose wrong. Some Imperators have been destroyed in battles that, in hindsight, were not worth the cost. Others have won victories so complete that their deployment seems obviously justified. Most fall somewhere in between, their sacrifices buying time and space for the Imperium to continue its desperate struggle for survival. The symbolism of the Imperator Titan has, if anything, grown stronger as their numbers have dwindled. They represent not just military power, but hope. The idea that the Imperium still possesses weapons from the age when humanity stood among the galaxy's mightiest civilizations. When common citizens see an Imperator walk to war, they believe the Emperor himself watches over the battle. That divine providence has sent a god machine to deliver them from their enemies. This faith, whether justified or not, provides morale benefits that extend far beyond the Titan's immediate combat effectiveness. The Space Marine chapters, the Astra Militarum regiments, the Imperial Navy crews, all take heart when an Imperator Titan joins their campaign. Its presence signifies that their cause is considered worth the risk of deploying humanity's most precious war machines. They fight harder, endure more, accept greater casualties, because the Imperator's presence suggests that victory is possible, that the terrible price they are paying serves a greater purpose. For the enemies of the Imperium, the appearance of an Imperator Titan on the battlefield creates its own calculus. Some enemies flee rather than face such overwhelming power, their forces breaking before battle is properly joined. Others commit everything they have to destroying the God Engine, understanding that eliminating it will shatter Imperial morale and remove the linchpin of the enemy's battle plan. Still others adapt their tactics, avoiding direct engagement with the Imperator while seeking softer targets, trusting that eventually the God Engine will leave and they can return to complete their objectives. The future of the Imperator-class Titans is uncertain at best. Barring some miraculous rediscovery of lost knowledge or divine intervention by the machine god or the Emperor himself, no new Imperators will ever be built. The existing God Engines will eventually fall, one by one, each loss permanent and irreversible. The question is not whether the age of Imperator Titans will end, but when and how many enemies they will destroy before that final ending comes. Some within the Mechanicus propose desperate measures to preserve the Imperators that remain. Suggestions include keeping them in reserve except for the most critical battles, accepting territorial losses rather than risking these irreplaceable assets. Others argue the opposite, that the Titans should be used while they can still fight, that letting them stand idle while the Imperium falls would dishonor both the God Engines and the countless crews who have served aboard them. These debates continue without resolution, with different Titan legions making different choices based on their own traditions and strategic situations. The Imperator Titans themselves, through their machine spirits, seem to understand their own mortality. Some accounts describe God Engines that seem eager to fight, as if they know their time is limited and want to make each battle count. Others report Titans that grow increasingly reluctant to wake from their dormancy, their machine spirits perhaps desiring to sleep rather than face the pain of another war, another loss, another reminder that they are relics of a dying age. For now, in this darkest hour of the 41st millennium, the Imperator-class Titans continue to walk. They stride across battlefields from one side of the galaxy to the other, their weapons speaking with voices that echo the glory of lost ages, their cathedral spires reaching toward heavens that seem increasingly dark and silent. Each one is a masterwork of technology and faith, a fusion of human ingenuity and divine inspiration, a weapon that makes even the mightiest champions of chaos or the fiercest aliens pause in recognition of the terrible power they face. They are dying gods, walking cathedrals of destruction, monuments to humanity's past greatness and present desperation. They are the Emperor's most terrifying war machines, and they remain, for now, the ultimate expression of mankind's refusal to surrender to the darkness that presses in from all sides. As long as even one Imperator Titan stands, as long as its reactor burns and its weapons fire, and its crew maintains the sacred bond between flesh and steel, humanity can still claim to possess weapons worthy of the term God Engine. The Imperator Titan is more than metal and weapons, more than even the fusion of human minds with machine spirits. It is a promise carved in adamantium and powered by the same forces that light the stars. It promises that the Imperium, no matter how beleaguered, no matter how desperate its situation, can still deploy force sufficient to shatter armies and break sieges. It promises that the Emperor's protection extends beyond faith and prayer to include instruments of war so terrible that they make even demons hesitate. It promises that humanity, despite 10,000 years of decay and stagnation, despite corruption and heresy and the slow death of knowledge, can still touch the divine through the machinery of destruction. When you understand what an Imperator Titan truly represents, when you comprehend the unholy fusion of human will and ancient technology, when you grasp the religious devotion and tactical acumen required to operate these god engines, when you fathom the sheer destructive power they bring to bear, only then can you appreciate why they are the most terrifying weapons in the Emperor's arsenal. Not because they kill the most efficiently, though they certainly can. Not because they are the largest, though they dwarf nearly everything else on the battlefield, but because they embody everything the Imperium has become: glorious and terrible, mighty and desperate, advanced and primitive, divine and damned, all at once, walking to war on feet that shake the earth, firing weapons that can level mountains, crewed by souls who have given up their humanity to become one with the machine. The Imperator-class Titan stands as the ultimate expression of humanity's war against the dying of the light, proof that mankind, for all its failings, can still build gods and make them walk. If you enjoyed learning about the Imperator-class Titans and the terror they bring to the battlefields of the 41st millennium, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the grim darkness of Warhammer 40k. There are countless other stories waiting to be told, from the smallest servitor to the mightiest Primarch, and I'll be here to bring them to you. Thanks for watching, and may the Emperor protect you.